When we talk about resistance to British rule in India, the first thing that usually comes to mind is the Great Revolt of 1857. But the truth is, the pot was simmering long, long before that. Today, we're going to rewind the clock and dig into one of the very first major uprisings. We're talking about the fierce, prolonged revolt in Midnapore and Dhalbhum, which kicked off all the way back in 1766.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a feel for what Bengal was like before all the chaos started. Then we'll look at what lit the fuse, the real seeds of this revolt. After that, we'll jump right into the uprising in Midnapore itself. And to wrap it all up, we'll see what happened in the end, the consequences of it all.
Okay, first up, a shifting Bengal. To really get what happened here, you've got to understand the lay of the land, who was who, and what life was like before the East India Company really started to tighten its grip. So let's zoom in on our map to the district of Midnapore in modern-day West Bengal. Now, it's super important to remember that when the British showed up, this place wasn't some empty wilderness. Oh no. It was a place with deep, deep roots, a complex web of local rulers and farming communities, all with a social and political structure that had been humming along for centuries.
And get this is what's absolutely wild. We're not talking about a handful of powerful people. In Midnapore alone, there were over 3,000 local landholders. These were the zamindars, the big shots, and the talukdars, who held smaller chunks of land. Think about that. It was this incredibly complex, decentralized system where tons of different people had their own little pockets of authority.
Okay, so there are two key groups you absolutely need to know to understand this story, the zamindars and the riots. The zamindars, they're the landholders, the guys in charge of collecting revenue. And the riots? They're the peasants, the folks actually farming the land. Now, the crucial thing here, especially in Midnapore, is that the relationship was, well, it was pretty solid. It wasn't just pay your taxes or else. It was a system built over generations, a kind of mutual dependency. The zamindars offered protection, and the riots worked the fields. It was a balance, And that balance, it's about to be completely shot. So that leads us to the big question. How did this system, which had worked for ages, just fall apart? Well, a new player entered the game, a powerful force that had a totally different rulebook when it came to land, power, and especially money.
And man, just look at this timeline. It's like a series of dominoes falling, one right after the other. It all happened so fast. In less than 10 years, the East India Company transforms from just a trading company into a massive military power. Plassey in 1757, Buxar in 64. These weren't just isolated battles. They were the critical steps that paved the way for the company to take over. And that directly led to this revolt starting just a couple of years later.
And here is the absolute game changer. Diwani rights. After the Battle of Buxar, the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765 gave the East India Company these rights. And what does that mean? Well, it sounds kind of formal, but it basically meant they got the keys to the kingdom. It wasn't just about collecting taxes anymore. It was the right to control the entire economy of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. A trading company had just become the government, overnight. So with this incredible new power in their hands, what's the first thing the company does? They roll out a brand new land revenue system. And it was nothing like the old one. It was harsh, it was demanding, and it was enforced with an iron fist. It completely ignored all those old relationships, all that history between the zamindars and the riots. This right here, this was the spark that lit the whole region on fire.
Now, the thing about the company's new policies is that they didn't just tick off one group of people. They managed to make everyone angry. And when that happens, well, you get some very strange bedfellows. It led to this incredible united front that really defined what this uprising was all about. I mean, just look at the two sides of this fight. On one side, you've got the traditional landholders, the zamindars, who are seeing their land, their power, everything they've known being stripped away. So what do? They team up with the peasants, the ryots, an unlikely alliance, for sure. And on the other side, you have the East India Company, a foreign power that honestly couldn't care less about tradition. All they wanted was to squeeze every last drop of revenue out of the land. This is why it wasn't just a simple peasant rebellion, it was the whole region pushing back together.
And let's be clear, this wasn't some riot that was put down in a weekend. We are talking about 8 long years. From 1766 to 1774, the people of this region fought back. This was a brutal, sustained war against what was becoming one of the most powerful military forces in the world. It just goes to show you how deeply they opposed what the company was doing.
So what happens after 8 years of fighting? What was the price of all this resistance? Let's get into the aftermath and the consequences.
Well, in the end, the outcome was pretty stark. Despite all that fierce, determined resistance, the simple fact was that the East India Company had a bigger army, better organization, and more resources. They eventually won. By 1774, the revolt had been completely and systematically crushed.
And this is what defeat looked like. This isn't just a list of names on a screen. Dhalbhum, Raipur, Panchet, each one of these was an estate, a home, ruled by a local family for generations. And they were all confiscated. Their land was taken away. This was the real-world consequence. A massive, forceful transfer of wealth and power straight from the local people into the hands of the British.
So yeah, the Midnapore revolt was ultimately crushed. It failed. But does that mean it didn't matter? Absolutely not. It's one of the first major examples of Indians standing up and fighting back. And it leaves us with a really big question, one that's key to understanding the entire history of India's freedom struggle. How did hundreds of these early revolts, these so-called failures, eventually add up? How did all those lessons, learned in blood and defeat, ultimately pave the way for a successful nationwide movement for independence? Something to really think about, isn't it?